Technic, it's going. Okay, we're live. Hi, Catherine.
Okay. Hi, Luciano. Welcome to another broadcast, or recording anyway, of WLJA Radio Common Law Under God. And we are pleased to have with us today Gloria Butler with the Firmament. And,
Hi, Gloria.
Hi, Luciana.
So great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Very excited.
We usually start with a prayer, and if anybody wants to jump in with one, or if they don't, I've got one. I just wanted to remind people that the Bible tells us to never harm children. That it would be better for a millstone to be placed on around the neck, is it? And thrown into the sea than that someone make one of these little ones to stumble. So, and we're getting to a point. We've gotten to a point that's exactly what the public schools are doing. And I wanted to point out too that this is just but one, but it's maybe the most important way in which our corporate oppressors harm us, and that is when we're the most vulnerable early in life. And institutionalization is a really remarkably effective way of cultivating a certain kind of group think where people will not question their rulers. And this has been cultivated for a long time. And I wanted to, because of the nature of your website too, Gloria, I did some research on the history of compulsory education throughout the centuries, and kind of went back to Martin Luther. And and I mean, a lot of this seems to have been brought about by formal religions. So could you address that for us?
Well, what I read was religions and military. That government, religions, and military, they want the children to have the same mindset so that they all... But in regards to Martin Luther, he wanted the children to learn how to read so they could read the Bible. Because that was right before or right after Gutenberg had printed the Bible.
Right.
And that's why he became a Protestant, because when he read the Bible, he realized that a lot of things that the Catholic Church was doing was not in line with the Bible, with Scripture. So he wanted children to learn, and everyone, not just children, but everyone to learn to read so that they could read the Bible.
But then that kind of got carried away, and in Prussia, in particular, it became a tool of authoritarianism, as I understand it. And then later on in the Americas, with the Puritans.
Well, the Puritans were Bible reading people, and they wanted to come here to escape religious persecution, so that they could read their Bible and practice their religion without persecution. So, but all that's changed now. Nobody reads the Bible too much anymore, I don't think. They don't understand it. The preachers don't. They don't understand what it's saying, so they don't teach it.
Okay. I wanted to get into how, and I think this was all the compulsory education was starting pretty much in Massachusetts, and then even spread outside of the Puritan colony, and then became really an entrenched forced process by the end of the 19th century. And that has been enforced by corporate code, certainly ever since the late 1800s. And we can look at some of the statutes and codes, but it seems like there was also a connection between the First Amendment and keeping the idea of an established religion out of the public schools. And that ran into the free exercise clause that public schools then became completely, by the 20th century, became anti-religion, certainly anti-Christian.
Just wanted a workforce. They want everyone indoctrinated to become factory workers or just to get into the workforce. And, there's been an entity that's been trying to negate the Bible and get rid of it and wash it away for millennia. And they don't have the power to do that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't seem to realize that, because I've been looking at their corporate statutes, of course, and they uniformly apply to persons who are in control of children, parents, guardians, could be grandparents. But the term person, and I didn't know if you were aware, Gloria, a lot of our people have become aware that the term person is a word of art. It's a technical term used by the corporation to designate not people, but an artificial construct that we agree to be. That they have created and that we agree to act as. So I'm seeing that a lot of homeschooling parents, for example, are very terrified of these statutes and codes. And I don't know if you're able to put some of them up there on the screen, Luciana. Going back to you. U.S. Supreme Court decision in Yoder versus Wisconsin, they applied a Wisconsin statute that looks very similar to the Ohio statute about who it applies to. And if you're able to put that up.
Can you see it okay?
Yeah, I can
Let me get back into that screen. Yeah, there's Wisconsin versus Yoder, and then it refers to footnote 2, where they actually reprint the statute that they used, which they gloss right over that the statute, it'll be in blue, footnote 2. And I think I sent that to you in a copy and paste format. Right. It says, okay, Wisconsin statute section 118.15 provides in pertinent part compulsory school attendance unless the child has a legal excuse or has graduated from high school. Any person having under his control a child who's between the ages of 7 and 16 shall cause said child to attend school regularly. Obviously, the parents in Yoder versus Wisconsin were never informed that they, as Amish, were clearly probably not persons. A lot of them probably did not even have birth certificates, some of the older Amish. and even later Amish. So they had no real claim to being owned by any corporation, including the corporations masquerading as government. So they could have easily nipped this in the bud by just pointing out, your statute does not apply to us. We are not persons. Whether or not we are persons having control over a child, we're not persons. And that would have been the end of it. Could have been the end of it. And we have the same thing in Ohio. And I wanted to get into a little bit of all the bad stuff that they can do to persons who have control over children, who they categorize as sometimes habitually truant.
Mm-hmm. They can take your house away from you if you're a homeowner.
Yeah, if you allow yourself to be treated as a person, if you don't establish early on that you're not one of their persons, because their statutes and codes pertaining to property tax also apply to persons. Everything in their codes basically apply to persons or various forms of persons like citizens, taxpayers, residents, occupants, and there's a host of other words that they think that they own. And when they label you with those terms, which they define in their corporate statutes, which are not law, they're just corporate policy, then, and you don't know that, and you think you think that the term person applies to you, it doesn't. But if you allow it, if you agree to act as a person, you will be treated as a person, and you will be subject, for example, to, are you going to be able to put this on the screen, Luciana, 3321.01, what the ORC says? Okay.
Right.
Okay, and I highlighted some of the areas where it mentions person right there at the beginning in the definition section. And then later on they tell you all the things they can do to you if you agree to be a person and you don't send your child to one of their indoctrination centers.
Mm-hmm.
And they can form, what would they call them? Absence intervention teams. Yeah. And the absence.
They love their teams.
Oh yeah, they love their bureaucratic mumbo jumbo. And a bureaucrat and an alternative, an absence intervention team can trigger events such as a filing in one of their fake tribunals, they call it court, and under one of their fake CPS statutes. So that's the ultimate club they have over your head. I did not check if there are also criminal sanctions for being a person that doesn't send their child to school. Why not? Why not make it a death penalty offense? What the heck? I mean, but persons can't really.
Funny how right here, the ORC says that the superintendent of the school which the child attends may excuse the child from attendance or whatever. How in the world the Ohio Revised Code gives someone else power to make decisions over your child is something else.
Because you've given them authority. That's why.
Yeah.
That's how. Yeah.
Well, in the Greek society, you brought forth your children to the state. And I think that's what's going on here. They're following the Greek.
All right. Good. Yeah, we saw recently when Biden tried to put that out there. I don't think that was that much appreciated by anybody. They're all our children.
Yeah. Right.
And before him, of course, Hillary did the same thing.
Yeah.
But
And they have to care. You know, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. I care for the sheep. I lay down my life for the sheep. All the other ones are just hirelings. They don't care about the sheep. They're just
no,
doing it for pay.
yeah, yeah,
And then they
and the benefits
misbehave.
from government, from federal contracts, yeah, for every child that they
Well, they
get.
give those contracts for those industrial schools to the churches. And so, just like in the days of old, they kidnapped indigenous children and put them in industrial schools. They didn't have a choice. That was completely, uh, what's the word, mandatory for those children to not only go to school, but to be in those schools. And they
Oh,
were
they had to live there,
taken
right?
away, yeah, from their parents. And
Yeah.
now they're finding all kinds of mass graves in those places.
And this was in Canada pretty famously, but
Not too long ago, yeah. But it's
did it
also
happen in the
happening.
U.S. also?
Pardon me?
Did it happen in the U.S. also?
Yes. And
Okay.
they're investigating them as we speak, and they're finding these mass graves. And over in Ireland, they found mass graves where these children
Hmm.
have died, and there's no account for them. There's no account for them. And they get testimony from the people who are now adults, and they're testifying about how mistreated they were in those schools.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
they're
they
just
their
warehouses.
excuse is we wanted to Christianize them. Well, that is not that is not Christianizing anybody. Christ, just like he said, it'd be better for you to put a millstone around your neck and throw yourself in the ocean than to harm one of these little ones.
Yes.
So he would not
Yes.
have approved of that in any way, shape, or form.
And I think there's also, I mean, what we're seeing now too is, you know, the sexualization of children, and they're using the public schools to do that. Before that happened, I was seeing in Ross County, Ohio, where they used the corporations known as the so-called public library, which catered a lot to school children, uh, had a story hour. They weren't. They didn't. They didn't dare start with the drag queen story hour, but they started with a story hour that was being led by a man who was notorious for being a pedophile, and he has since he waited for the statute of limitations for his crimes against children to expire and publicly confessed. So we know. I mean, we didn't just imagine it.
Mm.
Um, and he was the one selected to run this story hour. So there's with the endorsement of a psychologist, uh, Margaret Hill Daniels thought that was just a swell idea, and yeah,
It's like, who's in charge here?
I'm
Who would
sorry.
authorize something like that? Who's in charge here? Who would authorize something like that?
No one really knows because they hide behind this, you know,
Well,
the
it's
staff, the
it's
government.
it's kind of funny that you say that. Who's in charge? Because this is who they want to say is in charge. Is actually, hold on a second, the UN and the WHO. You know,
They
who are
claim to
now
be.
coming out saying that schools must equip children to have sexual partners. And the World Health Organization and United Nations are joined together in sexualizing little children, starting in kindergarten, primary education, and they're trying to normalize pedophilia and that's just a fact. And they've got documentation out where the WHO and the United Nations is telling the schools, we need to equip children with social and sexual relationships at a young age. We need to teach them this. We need to teach them about, about masturbating. And these are the things that the United States, the United Nations, and the WHO are telling the World Health Organization have out to our teachers and superintendents, and no one, well, some are, but there's so many schools and boards of education saying, okay, well, the United Nations and the World Health Organization say this, so yeah, this is what we have to do. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
It seems so ridiculous.
Look at this. Look at this. This is what they have out there. This is what they're telling the teachers and boards of education, the years that at 5 to 8 is when these schools need to teach children about kissing, touching, sexual behaviors. Are you kidding me? At 9 years old, teach these children about masturbating, and maybe even earlier, for the love of God.
Well, they've just taken the parental rights away. That's something parents should teach their children.
No, they're trying to, and many parents are sitting back doing nothing. Many are doing nothing. They're trusting the Board of Education. They're trusting what the teacher and the principals say. They're trusting they have your child's best interests at heart, and they better wake up.
Yeah,
this is not
even
good.
Before this, it seems like they tried to undermine parental authority in the schools. They tried to get children to think of their parents as fools.
Yes.
The teacher knew everything. The parents knew nothing.
Yeah,
and they're starting to teach the children that you can come to us, to the counselor or to the teacher, and we won't say anything to your parent. That's what they're doing now.
Yeah, I would call it what it is. It's a G word, and the next letter is R. I think it's one of the words that the fascists at YouTube like to censor people for them. So, but that's what they're doing, and it starts in subtle ways by undermining parental authority, by undermining, a parental role in the education process. There got to be a point where parents were really not welcome at school. When I went to school, and that was a long time ago, but I remember in the 50s, parents were welcomed into school, particularly if they could contribute something.
Mm-hmm.
But that changed somewhere maybe in the 60s, 70s. I don't know. In some places, not as much. But one of the things parents do, unfortunately, is even the parents who do care and are alarmed at what they see going on, they try and persuade the board members to see reason instead of disengaging, because at a certain point you can't really talk reason into most of these school boards members. They have other agendas. They are corporately connected to the corporations running the businesses that are schools and the education establishment. So instead of just taking them out, because I don't think that, we're seeing psychopathic behavior, obviously, in not only the school board members, but the teachers, no empathy, no understanding of child development at all. Certainly, I don't think a teacher who's a Christian is probably going to stand much of a chance of even being hired. But instead of expecting a psychopath to change, and psychopaths don't change, and particularly when they're motivated by, the almighty dollar, or the almighty Federal Reserve note, I should say.
Well, that's everybody's motivation now.
Oh,
Everything
yeah.
is a business.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't make a profit, then they don't want to pursue it.
That's why, we have to get corporations are illegal and unlawful. And they when they're called government, they lead to monopolies, which are even illegal in their system. We could easily get them out if we just had enough people to form we have a common law court in Ohio. We don't have parents who have come to us with the process that we can help them with to disengage their children from this evil system. And they will fall like a cheap suit, when they are served with the first, second, and third notices. You did this, you did that. It's wrong under, their own statutes, codes, and prior law, prior case law, and Bible law. It's wrong at every level, and they will admit it. They will admit it every single time. And once you have them admitting it 3 times, you have a contract with them. And that contract can be made into a court order, and they can have financial liability personally, not as agents of the corporation. If we had 25 plus, we could get them criminally, as they should be. They should be prosecuted. But, the people we're dealing with now, a lot of them are products of the education system themselves, and the browbeating that goes on with that, going back to, people in their 40s now were the products of an education system going back, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was already getting pretty bad. And if nothing else, regardless of the content of the so-called curriculum, it's institutionalization. It's imposing the idea of one way of thinking only.
Right. And if you don't agree, then you're ostracized.
Yes.
And with this whole digital system they're setting up, that makes it very easy for them to just turn somebody off. And they are excommunicated and put out, and they're not given any other alternative. For instance, now, if you don't have a digital ID, then you cannot function in society.
Right.
You need it to do business, to work, to have a job, to pay for your bills, all that kind of thing. That's what it's coming to. And actually, the same entity processes the UN and the WHO. They are dictating to the world what they're going to do. For instance, the lockdown situation, all that kind of stuff that goes along with that.
No.
They're putting themselves in that position to dictate to people what they're going to do, what they have to do. And if you don't, then all they have to do is unplug you out of the system, their digital system, and you can't function anymore.
Well,
you won't have access to your money and things like that.
Well, there's other ways you can have access to money or a means of barter, without putting everything you have into a corporate institution, into a bank. And we have to learn those ways. We have to start developing more of the parallel economies we already have. I mean, just today I was dealing as one of the people with another one of the people to do a chimney repair, and I could have done it corporately, but I've extracted myself from that because there's no reason for me to have ever done business as an LLC or other corporation. And little by little, you can pry yourself loose. And if you have no choice but to, one of the big ways, we pry ourselves loose is to stop being registered voters. You can live without being a registered voter. It's not as if your vote makes the slightest bit of difference because you're only choosing between brand X and brand Y as far as the slave master.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not losing anything there. And then and you rebut some of the presumptions created by their creation of your all capital birth name. That makes you a person in their eyes, doesn't make it true. Wherever possible, you can stop agreeing to be acting as a person. And, we put that in our documents and swear to it. And then regardless of whether they recognize what we've said or don't recognize it, we have the documents and we can establish, for example, when we repudiate corporate voting, being a registered voter, we always have our repudiation. And when they use those voter lists to say, oh, we're co-signers, we're guarantors of their debts, we're not. And we made that clear. So, that actually could protect you. The results of what we do may not be as obvious today as they will be over time. And you can be your own man or woman in some areas and be in contract with them in other areas where there's no realistic alternative. Some people who do common law still have a driver's license, for example, because they don't want to get beaten up by the side of the road. Some people for not having one. But other people, I mean, it depends on how well you can handle yourself and stand up to the tyrants. You always have to remember you have to make it worth their while to understand how they could be liable if they continue to step all over your rights. And they will be. We can do that. We can get judgments against them. And one day we will enforce them, and one day we will enforce common law presentments against them for criminal matters, and we will eject the tyrants, the corporate agents, from the public courthouses and the public lockup facilities. So,
well, Jesus said, why would you even go to court or go to law with the unjust? Anything
yes.
that they
I'm sorry.
Pardon me?
Okay, go ahead.
We're not hearing you.
What's happening here is if you go all the way back, like we talked the other night, Genesis 6, it says there were giants in the earth in those days. And if you look that word up, it's tyrants. There were tyrants. And so they go, and that was the reason for the flood, because there was so much violence and deception and idolatry, and everything they were doing was against God. So he brought the flood, and he gave Noah instructions on how to survive the flood by building the ark. So they built the ark, and they were in there for at least a year. and everybody else was washed away. And they came to the doors of the ark and said, "Come on, let us in. We don't want to die." And Noah says, "I've been warning you for 120 years. Where have you been? It's too late now." But then if you go to Exodus, you'll find after the Israelites were in Egypt and Pharaoh decided he wanted to wipe them out. So what he did was he put them into bondage, economic bondage. He made them work and he gave them all jobs and he said, "Now take back their wages little by little till they're working for nothing."
Mm.
And so when they cried to God, he sent Moses to bring them out of that bondage so that they could serve him and worship him because they weren't allowed to do that in Egypt. So that whole scenario is a shadow of what's going on right now. And so they take people stealthily. It's not an obvious thing. But you got a lot of people that are marching into this digital system thinking, "Oh, this is a great convenience. I don't have to carry money around anymore." But they're compiling, I don't know what the word is, bazillions of bytes of data that they're collecting on people worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
These
Mm-hmm.
corporations use that data for their own advantage. And so
Right.
corporations are serving themselves of the people. They're putting the people to work for them.
Yes. Yes.
And so God is against that. If you read Ezekiel 34, he talks about those shepherds that feed themselves of his flock. And he says, "I'm going to take my flock away from you. You're not going to feed them anymore. You're not going to feed yourselves of them anymore. I'm going to gather them together, and you're out of here." He's against that. So the thing
Mm-hmm.
is, you can't think that you can do anything by your own strength. The only way to defeat these guys is through God. Trust in God. He knows exactly what they're doing and how irreverent they are to him.
Mhm.
And so he's very well aware. He's prophesied it from the beginning. Everything that's happening right now has been prophesied, including the pedophilia, the wicked priests, the pedophilia, and they even know that. There's a book called The Church and Homosexuality, and it was written by one of their priests, and they referred to these scriptures that referred to them, pederast, perverted generation that will come about onto the earth, and all their deeds perverse. And they're the worst thing that the earth has ever seen. The earth has never seen a time like this before.
You think the time we're in now is worse than the time of Sodom and Gomorrah?
Yes,
We are
it
definitely
says that
living in biblical times. Yes.
you will be judged worse than Sodom and Gomorrah. Jesus said that.
Okay.
So, but it will be like those days of Sodom and Gomorrah. And as soon as Lot and his family escaped from there, that's when they were destroyed because they were sinning against God, their whole way of life. They actually killed one of Lot's daughters for feeding a homeless man. He was
Um,
out in the square. They couldn't figure out, how is this man staying alive? Why is he still alive? So they watched, and it was one of Lot's daughters that was feeding him. And so they killed her. It was against the law to help or to feed the homeless people.
And that's going on now. I've seen people be arrested for feeding the homeless. Yeah.
Yes. So it's very
Wow.
similar scenario. And they can expect nothing more than or nothing less than what happened to them,
Mm-hmm.
because they do worse than Sodom in
In
the
what way? How do you mean that? How is it worse? They're just more widespread, or
well, the reason where he said, well, Sodom had uh, all the prosperity that they needed. They had a very prosperous society like they have here, and yet they have people living on the streets. There's no excuse for that. That's a total.
no?
And then they say, oh, Jesus said to feed the hungry and house the homeless, but they're not doing that in a physical
No.
way or a spiritual way, because where Jesus said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." So the food and drink that he's talking about is teaching God's word, and that's will what will bring about prosperity for the people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They keep God's commandments, but they've thrown them out the window. They don't have any reverence for God or anybody else, and they're not taking care of anyone but themselves. And they end up to be the 1% that owns all the wealth of the planet and leave everybody else with nothing. And that's
And
what
it's still not enough for them.
right. They're just a bunch of greedy dogs that never have enough. And that's what those tyrants in the beginning did. They put men to work and they took all that they could produce until they couldn't even take care of themselves, provide for themselves anymore. So all those scenarios from the Old Testament are shadows for the end, which is where we're at, and they're doing the same thing, the same scenarios. They're bringing people into economic bondage. The national debt is up to, I think it's $35 trillion. Now you could see interviews where people say, "Did you see the uh, the debt is up to $4 trillion? Isn't that awful?" Well, what if they saw it now? It's $22 trillion at least. I don't know.
Or they're getting into the quadrillions, I think. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's ridiculous. It's a debt that can never be repaid. But in God's law, every 7 years, and of course, then every Jubilee is every 49 years. The 50th year is a year of Jubilee when all debts are to be canceled.
For everybody, even for the ones that really owe, an enormous amount for their evil.
Well, that's in the community. That's not
Mhm.
the tyrants. They don't get relief. No, they're not forgiven.
No. But they're the ones that want it. They're the ones pushing for this. They want their debt to be absolved.
Oh, well, sure. But they
Yeah.
don't want anybody else's debt to be absolved because
Mhm.
that's how they enslave people. That debt has
Mhm.
to keep being paid back. And then the interest uh, keeps rising. So it's something that can never be paid off.
Right, right.
And think about the generation, it's left for the generations that will come behind us. That
Mhm.
the little babies that be born into this slavery.
Well, and it's really gotten beyond, even the evil committed in this world because of the invasion of, the heavens now, or whatever it is they're doing. They're interfering. They're trying to create life. They're trying to one up God every way imaginable.
Well, he just laughs them to scorn because there's no way that they can. There it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I have that app too. But if you click on the bottom where it says POTUS, I think it's POTUS, then you can see the
Where are we clicking?
should be down on the bottom of that app.
POTUS? Yeah.
Yeah. If you click that, it'll show you through time the presidents that have caused that debt to accumulate and what increments. For instance, it didn't go into the trillions until Reagan became president. Prior to that, it was in the billions. They don't
At
have
some
that.
point, there was a surplus, wasn't there? Or was
Well,
there never a surplus, really?
not of the national debt, no. Well, it should be down, go down a little bit lower. So maybe that's different. Well, anyway, I do have that app, and there is another tab at the bottom there where you can go and it will show you all the accumulation and whose administration. For instance, um, FDR. You know, during World War II, the debt went up, and you can see things like that in time. And that they have projections also, and they project in 2030 that the debt will be $55 billion.
That doesn't seem so that big now. 55 billion or trillion?
Sorry, trillion.
Yeah.
$55 trillion. And
Yeah. It's just almost meaningless numbers at this point.
yeah,
Yeah. And it doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon.
it rises so fast you can't stop it
Right.
to see what it is. It just keeps going up, and that.
Oh.
Yeah.
And that's usury. That's another thing that's against God's law. You cannot. He commands against usury.
And that's any interest at all on a
Charging,
debt.
right.
But the states, the corporate states have enacted their own usury statutes. I can't remember what it is for Ohio. I don't know, 4%, 5%. But then they just incorporate in South Dakota or one of those states where the sky's the limit, and they can charge any 20%, 30%, compounded,
Yeah.
Whatever they want.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's terrible. That's just.
So we don't have to put up with this, and I understand people are frightened, ignorant, lazy, cowardly, or complicit, and that interferes with being able to do anything. But if they can't even stand up for their children, I don't know. People do tend to not want to stand up for their children. They will stand up against being robbed before they will stand up for their children. It has been my experience. Isn't that sad?
It's very sad. I've seen it.
The maternal instinct is the strongest instinct on the planet. So to think that people have abandoned that protection of their own children, it's
exactly. I think a lot of it has to do with this social media and all of this on your phones and being on all these different social media sites, and nobody wants to be looked at like they're different, like they're standing out. Everybody wants to blend in with each other, no matter whether it's right or wrong. They just want to be blendy, and they're doing such a disservice to their own children.
Yeah, because they're not
because they don't
Just give them a
Yeah.
screen and act like it's a babysitter. It's not a
Right.
babysitter.
Right.
You know,
And they,
indoctrination is to inject someone with your doctrines.
mhm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what they do on those things. They're not being
And it
taught.
isolates them from real human contact with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of their strategy of mind control is to isolate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they know
Yeah.
all that with the psychological studies that they've done on children and experimenting on them with mind control to find out how to manipulate them, how to get them addicted.
Mm-hmm.
And they use
Mm-hmm.
the advertising agencies and marketing systems go after the kids, and they've studied all that psychological uh, manipulation in learning how to get to these kids
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
for years now. They did it with our generation.
Right. Right. Yep.
It's just to sell products, and that's all they care about. Their bottom line. And if their products are harmful, they don't care. But it says in God's word that they're going to be bring their own selves down with all that. You can't really do anything. They're going to cause it to happen themselves. So you just kind of sit back and watch it happen because what they're doing cannot go on. It
We have
cannot.
to start small because our reach is small, but we
Mhm.
could, and that's why we're doing what we're doing in the court and with our
Yeah.
notice process, which is based on Jesus's word. He told us how to resolve disputes with our fellow man. If we have to deal with a mega corporation, we can't do it. It's impossible. But if we deal with a fellow human being, yeah, we can. And that's how this has to be taken down. And I'm starting to feel that maybe we won't be the generation that will see this bear fruit, but it's still important that we move forward with it and create some accountability in our lifetimes and teach our children how to do that. And
Wait, no, Catherine, sorry. I want to say we will be the generation to see this bear fruit. We will.
I
We
pray
will.
that we will be. I want to
And
see it.
I
I
I
want to see
am
it real
praying
bad.
that we will be the generation to see fruit from this. And so I am having faith that we will be the generation because I want to see my children and my grandchildren in a better place before I go. I mean, at least with this crazy this public education and just what's being taught to our kids out there and just the workers of iniquity constantly trying to knock you down and take over and rule over you and we've got to make a difference. We got to make a
Well,
difference.
in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus said, "The generation that sees these things know that this generation will not pass until all things are fulfilled." And we are seeing all those things. All the things that he prophesied that would come upon the earth are here. And he's been quoting from the prophets. He read Enoch, he read Ezra, he read Jeremiah, he read Isaiah, he read all those books. He was very well read and very well associated with their writings. And he
Mhm.
quotes from them constantly. And he says, "Well, did Isaiah prophesy of you?" He says that to the priests, that you have eyes to see, ears to hear.
Ears to hear.
Yes, and you teach for doctrine the commandments of men and not the commandments of God.
Would you say that last part again? I think I missed some of that.
Instead, you teach for doctrine the commandments of men, not the commandments of God. He was
That's what we're doing wrong. Yeah.
right, and he was quoting the prophet Isaiah, who's in the Old Testament. And
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah said the same thing. They teach doctrine, their own doctrines and their own commandments, and don't teach
Mm-hmm.
the commandments of God.
They
Right.
will pay.
Right.
They will pay dearly for that. They think that they won't. They don't see. Might not see it today or tomorrow, but they might see it the next day. They will pay dearly for that.
Absolutely. Because they, like you said, they're trying to bypass God. Well, he's God. You can't do that to him. He's fully aware of what they do.
Well, yeah, he's totally in control, and for some reason he wants to give them enough rope, maybe
Yeah.
that they will hang themselves.
I think a
Uh,
lot of these people they don't believe in God.
mm-hmm.
It has to be they don't believe in God, and
Well,
it's a
that's the point that they.
scary place to be.
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
That's a point that they have come to, that they say he doesn't even exist. And that's the point that was prophesied that they would come to, that they'll say, even say that the creator does not exist. Now they are creating their own gods. They're
Mm-hmm.
creating a mechanical God that they can go to and ask questions of. That's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, they're saying AI will replace God, and AI will write a new Bible. I just saw that recently. What?
That's absolutely insane.
Mm-hmm.
There is no way that they can defeat God. That
At the same time, I don't think that we're doing what we're doing. We're trying to bring accountability so that our children can have some kind of a cushy life and don't have to worry about this anymore. The problem is not so much the evil ones as us that are allowing it. And I think that sense of responsibility has to be passed down, or what we're going to have these same problems back again.
Yep. Yep. People need to stand up and do what's right and they need to say something. They need to do something, not just sit back and allow this continue to happen and sit back and watch and oh well, it's going to happen. And
God's
but
going
I
to
don't
come and take care of it all, so I can just sit back
right.
and eat
Uh,
Cheetos.
I'll just pray and it'll and prayer of course is going to lead to something happening and it's going to happen, but we also need to take action ourselves where we
Right.
can. We have to.
Well, Genesis 1:26. From the very beginning, he told us to take charge, and we didn't do it. Well, Noah
well,
did.
that's the quote you were scrolling.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now that says, let us make Adam in our image and after our likeness, and let them, male and female, have dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, the cattle, which is the four-footed beasts, and over all the earth and every creeping thing that creeps. So that was his intent, to have Adam and his wife have dominion and care, and to take care and guardian and
Mm-hmm.
protect the creation.
Yes.
But
And we've delegated it to Satanists.
Satan, as the serpent, went in there and what? He beguiled Eve. He deceived Eve into disobeying God and eating from that tree that he told him not to eat. He said, don't eat from there. If you do, you'll die. Now, that's like a parent telling a little child, don't eat the berries off that bush because they're poison and they'll cause you to die. But here comes the serpent, and he told Eve, oh, you're not going to die. It's okay. So they ate from there. She gave it to Adam, and then they were cast out of the garden. So
Mm-hmm.
it was Satan's sin causing them to disobey God's word and cause this whole thing. Now, what's happening at the end is that they will be brought back
Does
into
that
the
look
garden.
does that look familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that the LGBTQ colors?
The Apple logo.
The Apple
Yeah.
logo. Well,
One of the Apple logos.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
he
You know.
donates a lot of money to that cause.
Hmm.
But
Which
we're not self-governing. We're delegating, our responsibilities that God gave us to ungodly
so
people.
what I'm saying is that we need to come out, just like they came out of Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
Come out.
Yes.
Don't participate with them. What they represent is enslavement. And that's what they have in their
Yes.
mind, to enslave humanity.
Right. Right. You were mentioning about, the nature of the creation that we are to be good stewards of, and that includes the fish of the sea. And they have tried to usurp that even in their constitution. They claimed early on, oh, we have control over admiralty and maritime law in the Constitution. No, they don't. Just because they said so? No, 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 no,
Well, there's a
no,
lot of people who say they have authority that don't.
no.
For
They only
instance,
have what they
the
proclaim for
Baptists
themselves.
say that they have authority, they have apostolic succession, and that they have that authority, and they do not.
No.
They
I
were
just
never.
wanted to bring that out because a lot of common law people and patriots are misguided to think that they do in that area, the admiralty thing in the maritime and interstate commerce and this, and except for this, except for that. No, they don't have any of it. It's all been a lie.
Right. And the beginning of that was that international, I don't know,
The
marketing.
United Nations or
No, the international commerce, maybe international. I
all
can't
the treaties that are supposed to have the same force as the Constitution, which isn't much, they were all created by fraud. They
Right,
can all be undone. They're all void.
right. And it's all for trade, marketing, trade.
Oh, the globalism treaty, NAFTA, the
Well,
North American Free Trade. That was the beginning.
that's
Yeah.
more recent. But before that, they had international trade something.
There have been all kinds of trade associations,
Hmm.
and the more international, the better. And it's all been to promote greed, it seems like.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. And they'll even tell you they've been given charge over the planet on
Oh,
that.
they tell us that.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, right. That's a given, kind of.
they don't have any authority to do anything.
No, no, they don't.
Oh, another thing, have you ever heard of the writings on the wall?
Yeah, that comes from. Where does that come from?
That's in Daniel, the prophet
Okay.
Daniel.
Yes, after the one potentate's dream.
Right, he saw a
No, he was at a
man.
party. He was at a party,
He was at
wasn't
a
he?
party and he saw the writing on the wall and he thought, what does that mean? They finally, none of his counselors could tell him. So he finally called Daniel to come and interpret that for him. And the
Mm,
interpretation was that your days are numbered and you're finished. Your dominion is finished. And that night he was killed by the Cyrus of Medo Persia. And that's when it went from Babylon to Medo Persia. And if you look at Daniel in the 2nd chapter, Nebuchadnezzar had a vision of an image. The head of was gold, the arms were silver, the sides were brass, and the legs were iron, and the feet are iron and clay.
Yeah.
Familiar with that?
Yeah. Bits and
And
pieces of it more. Yeah.
so yeah, and so there was a stone that came down from heaven and hit that image on the feet and caused its collapse. And it was like the chaff that was blown away, the chaff of the summer floor. Let's see. It's down a little further. See, he had the dream, and he told his counselors about that he had a dream and required them to tell him what it was, and they couldn't. He says, "Well, I was
Right.
aware of the dream. You can't tell me." So when he called Daniel in, there's where he called Daniel in right there. You know, in 28, he said, "There is a God in heaven that reveals secrets and will make known to the king what shall be in the latter days."
Okay.
And so if you go down to 32 or 31 and 32, it just talks about this great image that was terrible. That means it was frightful. And the head was gold, the arms silver. So the gold represents Babylon. The silver represents Medo-Persian Empire. Well, that night that when Belshazzar was killed is when the Medo-Persian Empire came into being. And then after that was the Grecian Empire, and then after that was the Roman Empire, and now they're down to the feet. So that's another indication of what time it
Oh.
is.
Mm-hmm.
They are down to the feet. So the fourth kingdom will be strong as iron. For as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things, as the iron that breaks in pieces, it shall break in pieces and bruise. Well, that's the Roman Empire. And they have subdued all things, brought all things under their dominion. They did anyway. So now
Mm.
they,
Yes. Well, they've taken over, the corporate law is Roman civil law.
yes. And I was going to say, the idea of being guilty until proven innocent is from the Roman law.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Innocent until proven guilty is the common law, and that comes from God's law. Because he requires the judges that sit in judgment of his people to be righteous. And if there's a case, they need to diligently inquire into all aspects to come up with a verdict. You don't just, and you're forbidden to take bribes, and that is any kind of donation, the way they take lobbyist donations. You got people on the Supreme Court going on trips paid for by lobbyists. That is illegal in God's law because it perverts your judgment.
Well, the whole idea of a government being a corporation by definition can harm others without incurring liability. That's never been God's law, that you can hurt other people and never have to make amends.
Well,
No.
that's just not going to go. His judgment comes all the way from Cain killing Abel. He says, anyone who spills blood, with their blood will be spilled in the same way. So they have a lot of fun.
Yes, yes. Right. Yeah, there's
There you go. Woe unto those who make unrighteous decrees, call good evil and evil good.
and there's another one we just used about those who take others into captivity. Into captivity, they too will go.
Exactly.
Um,
Because
but I
as
wanted
you
to, Go ahead.
Okay. As you judge, so will you be judged. As you do
Mm-hmm.
unto others, that will be done unto you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And we have just started using that in our notices, but the notice process for resolving disputes with our fellow man was told to us by Jesus in Matthew 18:15. If thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee, and if he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. But if he doesn't hear you, then take with thee one or two more, that in the mouth of two or three witnesses every word may be established. Matthew 18:16. And if that still doesn't resolve the matter, if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it unto the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as a heathen man and a tax collector. Matthew 18:17. So that's why we do the 3 notice process. And we tell them why. We tell them why. And they never dispute anything. Some people ask, well, why is the Bible allowed to be in their fake corporate tribunals they call courts? Because they were not able to keep it out. Not that they didn't want to, but they were not able to.
Yeah, they don't want to go by, they don't want to look at it. God's word condemns what they do. He
Yes.
says, here's the condemnation that light has come into the world, and men prefer darkness rather than light because they won't come to the light because the light reproves them that they are wicked.
So it's up to us to bring that light to bear on their deeds.
Light comes from God. The
Yeah.
light is the wisdom and knowledge of God.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Mm-hmm.
the first step to take, is to learn his word.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that way,
Amen.
in there, that way you will be created in his image if you have his word in you. That's
Yes.
made in the image of God.
Mm.
And that's the new covenant. He said, I'll make a new covenant with you because you didn't keep the old one. And you know that a covenant's the same as a contract, right? So
Yes.
if any party defaults on the contract, that makes the contract null and void, right?
Well, if you default on the contract, if you breach the contract,
You breach the
it,
contract.
if you breach that contract, you're at fault. It doesn't do away, well, does away with the other party's obligation to perform.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
God did a covenant with Israel,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't keep their part.
So
So
God
he,
has to keep his part. Right.
right, he's not obligated to keep that covenant.
Right.
So that's why he said, I'll make a new covenant with you because you didn't keep the old covenant, you broke it,
Mm-hmm.
and I have rejected you. But the new covenant will come, and I will write my laws in your heart and in your mind, and you will be my people, and I will be your God.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's necessary to get his word in your heart and in your mind. And that's where his word is a sanctuary. His word is a liberator. That's where you will find liberation from this
Yes.
tyrannical government.
Right. Um, yeah. Yeah. We have to stay apart from. We're in the world, but we can't be of it, and we have.
Exactly.
Exactly. We're not of the
Exactly.
world. Because he said, I'm not of this world. This world is wicked.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they call evil good and good evil, and their judgments are unjust. And so just like in the days of Egypt, when they came out of that bondage and they went out into the wilderness to learn, and that's where Moses taught them the words of God, because he would go up on the mountain and get the word from God, converse with him, and then he would come down from the mountain and teach the people. And some of them said, "Oh, who made you the boss over here? Who made you the ruler over us?" And those guys were eliminated that went against Moses and Aaron.
Yes.
Moses and Aaron were chosen by God as to deliver his people.
Right. Right.
And
But
he said,
yet Moses was not allowed to see the promised land. God did not allow him that.
but he did cause Joshua, he gave that over to Joshua to bring them into the promised land and cause them to inherit their inheritance. And the name
Oh yeah.
Joshua is the
Yeah,
same.
God took on his part. Yeah.
The name Joshua is the same as Jesus, Yehoshua.
Oh yeah.
That's Joshua in the English. Jesus is his Greek name. Yehoshua is his Hebrew name. But anyway, and so that was a shadow that of him to have Joshua bring them into the promised land. Here you go. That's the Pharisees, lawyers have taken the key of knowledge, and they don't go in, and they don't let anybody else go in either. They're like dogs in a manger. They don't allow anyone else to eat.
Well, you've taken away the key of knowledge. You entered not in yourselves, and then that we're entering in ye hindered.
Yeah, the ones that want to go in and learn it, you hinder, i.e., the
Yes.
ones that
Right. 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 Oh, yeah. Luke 11:52. All right. I have to use that.
Yeah, he says they're like dogs in the manger.
Yes. Is that in there too? My mother used to use that term with me all the time. It's sort of a curse. He's a dog in the manger.
Well, it's because those are the priests that won't let the sheep eat.
Uh-huh.
They prevent them from eating of the and taking
Yeah.
advantage of the key of knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why, it seems like they're just obsessed with taking from us, not because they want it or could use whatever it is, but just so we won't have it.
Hmm. Well, if, just like the book of Enoch, when they were many years ago in Egypt, they had to do away with that to gain control of the people because
Mm,
it gave the people freedom from their governance. And that's what God's word represents to his people is the freedom. It gives freedom and liberation and liberty to the captives to come out and be free and to serve God, not
mhm.
human tyrants that want to dominate over you. They don't have permission to do that. And it's the writing is on the wall for them. They have no more authority. Their time is up.
Right. Well, I don't know how to overcome people's fear, because they believe they live in a world that has been taken over with might makes right, and that they will always be wrong. Um, Be that as it may, I think we still have to. I mean, that may be true on their turf, but we have to stay on our turf, that's of
Right.
God, and
He's separate.
yeah. Well, okay. Is there anything that we should zero in on before we conclude
It says right
in
there,
addressing children?
deliver me from the workers of iniquity. Save me from bloody men. Those are the workers of iniquity. They've got the blood on
Yes.
their hands, and
Mm-hmm.
he's going to deliver us just like he delivered Israel in the days when they were in Egypt. Come out and be delivered and serve
And
God.
we have to bring our children out too.
Right. That's right. We have to teach them the way in which they should go because they're not being taught right in their mandatory schools.
Mm-hmm.
That it's up to the parents to teach them. I
Absolutely.
learned about God when I was little.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had to memorize his commandments. I learned, different Bible story. You learn about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And you learn about, and those are your ancestors that you learn about. And so when they're spoken of, it's being spoken of.
We prayed. I remember prayer in school. Yeah.
Yeah, well, see, you're an adult and you still remember that.
Yes.
And you still have a connection that way with God.
Yes.
But what do they teach you? How to hold hands with another child?
I don't know. I don't know what it is. They won't let us know as parents. They won't let us in because their deeds are dark and they don't want
Right.
anyone
So
to.
that's the parents' responsibility is to teach the children,
Yes, it
not to
is.
give it to strangers. When you give your kids over to strangers, you don't know what their ideals are.
Exactly. That's very scary to take your kids, put them into a building with people you really don't know that well, and hope they're going to be okay for 8 hours a day, however many 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Let's hope everything turns out okay with our children.
Right. Among people that we don't even know who they are. Really?
Right. They're strangers.
Yes. And the other children our children are forced to associate with. We don't know what they're up to and what they've been taught.
Exactly. Or what they've
Yes,
been
what
taught,
they'll learn from them.
or what they're learning from the people they're around that they're sharing with your children. And
Uh-huh.
it's
I mean, how anybody can think that's consistent with freedom, I have no idea. To be
that you're
forced
to be
to
forced.
associate with strangers that you don't want to associate with and you don't want your children to associate with.
Exactly.
I mean, how can you think it's okay to be forced to give the most precious thing in this world that you have, which is your children, and put them where they say you must be forced to put them in this many hours a day? That's the
Yeah,
most
and a lot
precious
of those,
thing that you have in the
right.
world. And they're going to tell you what to do and how to do it, when to do it, how long to do it. Come on.
We've
Yeah,
had how many generations now since the Civil War in which it became apparent that if you don't want this government, we think you've breached the contract, the social contract with us, and the remedy for us is to kill you. That was what the deal was at the end of the Civil War. if the southern people we don't want this government anymore. Just like if you have a landscaping service, I don't want your service anymore. They don't generally come out and kill you for, breaching a contract, which you didn't even breach. It's a service contract. And, if you don't want to be in it, then you're not in it. But we have all of that since 1861 to, if every 30 years to 91 to about 6-7 generations since then that have been brainwashed that this is okay.
Right. I mean, what they're doing now in these public schools, if you don't want your kids in public schools and you don't send them, then we're going to take the kids from you and we're going to govern the children, and they'll be in property of the state because we said so. Yeah. Isn't that something? They're literally taking children from parents if their parents don't agree that this is what their child needs, to go to public school and be taught whatever they say the child needs to learn. You don't do it, we're taking your kids. This is where we're at right now. This is where we're at.
Yeah, and that mindset comes from the Vatican. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, they're a big part of it.
The Inquisitions, and then prior to that, it was in the time of the Maccabees, it was the Greek, the Alexander the Great, Antiochus Epiphanes. They forced people to adhere to their customs and their laws and their statutes. And anybody else, they would tear up their books and throw them in the fire and kill them. So that's why you have now recently, well, within the last, I guess it was around 1940, in the 1940s, they found 2 different libraries. One was in the Dead Sea and the other one was in Egypt, Nag Hammadi Library, that were hidden because if they hadn't hidden them, they would have been burned up. The Roman authorities gathered all their books and threw them in the fire, which they're having that now too, and doing book burning and banning the books that they don't want you to read. And so those people were labeled as heretics that didn't agree with their Orthodox doctrines, and so they were killed. There were massive amounts of people have been burned at the stake or killed in many fashions because they didn't agree with the Orthodox doctrine of the Catholic Church.
Right.
Now,
and God didn't want us. God didn't want our faith and our worship based on fear and threat.
Right. He says, "Don't be afraid of them."
Exactly.
Stand up to them boldly. Be bold and stand up to them.
Exactly.
And they'll turn around and run away from you.
We're finding that often is the case. Yes. Yeah.
But you can't. This is what you got to understand. You can't be on the fence there. When in a situation like that, when God tells you, do not fear man, fear me, and you're riding the fence, okay, I'm not going to fear them, but there's the problem. You've got to remove that that question mark. You've got to be strong in your faith, and you've got to trust God and fear God and not fear man, because that's what he tells us to do. You either do it or you don't. There's no in between. Do you fear them just a little bit? Just fear them just a little bit, but fear me more. No, that's not what he says.
That word fear is also reverence. So when it says to fear the Lord, it means to reverence the Lord and to honor him.
Okay.
not to fear him. Because as it says, Paul says, there is no fear with love. If you love someone,
Right, right.
there's no fear there. It's a reverence and an honor for him, not a fear. But he does want the wicked to fear him because he's going to come
Uh,
on them. They're in big trouble, just like Pharaoh. You know what he did to Pharaoh? He, besides all the plagues that he put on him, and Pharaoh was having the children thrown in the river. That's why Moses was put in the little ark when he was a baby to save him
mhm,
from having been thrown in the river and drowned. Because that was the proclamation that the Pharaoh made for all the male children to be killed. And so when they came out and went out through the Red Sea on dry land, the Pharaoh's army followed after him, and he caused all that water to overflow
mhm,
on them. So
mhm.
he says, "Remember what I did to Pharaoh."
And he'd given them plenty of warnings beforehand
Right.
to to let the people go.
And don't fear him. Don't fear what they can do to you, but fear what I can do to you.
Yes.
Exactly.
And they don't have any fear, reverence for God at all.
None.
And that's
None. It's
that's
quite
the
evident. Quite
it is
evident.
yeah.
I wonder, I think there's some. They know who's really in charge, but they want to steal it for themselves, that reverence. That's why they expect us, and you might be locked up if you don't stand when they say, "All rise," and the black
Right.
robed demon from hell walks in. You're supposed to rise
Right.
and show reverence.
Well, that's another thing in the Daniel chapter 3. There's an image that Nebuchadnezzar put up, and he said, "Now, when he called all of his counselors and governors and everybody, when you hear the music play, all these
Mhm,
musical instruments and all kinds of music, then you have to bow down to my image." And there were three Jewish kids, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Heard of them? And
mhm.
Yeah.
they
Mhm.
refused to bow to that image. And they were thrown into the fire, the furnace of fire. And God saved them out of it because they
Yes.
trusted in him. They said, "We don't care what you do. We're not going to worship your gods or your image, no matter what you do."
Amen. We need to start doing that in the public courthouses to the extent I don't think we should even go in there. I think that's visiting the dens of iniquity when we do that.
Mhm.
Right there.
Exactly.
If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace. But
Mhm,
even if he
mhm.
doesn't, we're not going to bow down to your image.
That's right. That's
That's
right.
an example of how we're supposed to deal with it.
Yeah, yeah.
We're not going that way, no matter what you do.
And people will be afraid, well, but if we don't bow down, if we don't do this, they'll do that, and
Mhm.
you know what?
Exactly.
They'll do it anyway. They'll do it anyway, or worse. When they know you're weak, they will do even worse to you than when you stand up to them.
Right. So better stand up to them.
Yeah, it's like the schoolyard bully. We all know that, don't we? Or
Well,
the
that's
Exactly.
even the public education system tries to beat that out of our children too. Oh, let the bully do whatever he wants to you, because we'll get you in trouble and not him.
there's no defense for these kids. How are they being so mistreated? There's no adult there to say, "Hey, cut that
No,
out."
it never is there? No supervision, when that happens. No. And that I remember that when I was growing up, there was no adult that would protect me from a group of, mean girls.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
and my parents told me what to do, and I did it, and that was
Yeah.
the end of that.
Yeah. Same here. Same here with the mean girls. And unfortunately, when you stand up to them and you defend and protect yourself, then the school decides to kick you and the mean girls out. And
Right.
they
And
don't. They
I told
don't.
my
They
parents,
don't.
I'll get in trouble. We will stand by you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, they think that they've taken over, but they've only fooling themselves. That's not when you read his word, he'll tell you the wicked
mm,
will destroy themselves.
yes, yes. I think they're busy doing that.
Hmm.
Oh, they're busy doing that. All right.
Hmm.
In the meantime, just sit back and that's another aspect, and I explained that the other day to you, that of the day being 1,000 years,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that we're actually in the Sabbath time, because if you calculate back to Adam, it's been 6,000 years from there, and yet Jesus was in the midst. If you look at the menorah candelabra,
Hmm.
so each one of those candlesticks represents a day, and that Jesus was here on the fourth day. He was here right in the middle, in the center of that candelabra, and he died at the end of the fourth day. So with each day being 1,000 years, then we're 2,000 years out from him. That puts us at the end of the sixth day, or the beginning of the seventh. And he says, don't avenge yourselves, because vengeance is mine, saith the Lord.
That's right.
I will avenge. And that is exactly what he's going to do, and bring that on their head for all
Hmm.
that they mistreated people. Second Ezra from the Apocrypha. You familiar with the Apocrypha? It used to be included.
No,
It used to be
I know what
included.
it is, but
Oh, I was going to tell you too that we have all those books on thefirmament.org. We have a library of books.
okay.
The
I,
book
I
of Jasher,
on your website, on your firmament website.
yes, the book of Jasher, the book of Jubilees. And the other day I told you that story about Canaan stealing the
Yeah,
land. And I
yeah.
told you, I thought it was in the book of Jasher, but it is not. It is in the book of Jubilees, verses 9 and 10.
Okay.
And it'll tell how after they got off the ark, they split, or first they took a vow with each other, that anyone who would take anything that didn't uh, that wasn't allotted to them, that they would be under a curse.
Hmm.
Well, then Canaan, he went in and took the land that belonged to Shem, and his sons took that land, and they warned him. His own father, Ham, warned him. He says, "You can't do that. You'll bring a curse upon your head." And that's what they did. And that's why it's called the land of Canaan. But it's the land that had belonged to Shem, was allotted to Shem. And that's why it's been promised back to Abraham and his seed, because it belonged to them in the first place. And
Right.
I said that is in the book of Jubilees. So anyway, we have all these books available. We have Enoch, the Apocrypha,
The Book of Jasper, you told me too.
Jasher, Jasher, Jasher.
Okay.
And it means the upright record. Yes, and that one's on there. And that, to understand Genesis, Jasher is like the unabridged version of Genesis. It has a
Oh,
lot more detail. in that time, pertaining to that time period.
You want to explain briefly to the people why, what happened to the version of the Bible that we get? I mean, there have been various versions, and why some books were left out, and who made those choices. I understand that the Romans and the
The
Roman
Roman
Church.
Catholics, in their councils, set
Mhm.
up what books belong there and which ones didn't. And so they threw Enoch out. I don't know if they even knew about Joshua, but all those books they found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, all the Old Testament books are included in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
So we know about their authenticity.
Yes, well, you can tell by what it says. If it agrees with what's being said in the scriptural Bible, then it agrees. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. Don't listen to it.
Mhm.
But you can
Mhm.
read it, and you can pretty much tell if you're familiar with the scripture if it fits in there or not.
Mhm.
Because you
Okay.
can tell real easily if something doesn't fit.
Right. Well, the more wisdom we can get, the better armed we will be for
That's
what
right.
lies ahead for us.
That's right. That is
Correct.
our arming.
Okay.
Get the full armor of God on so we can defeat
Yes.
the
That's
devil.
right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Especially in these times. Especially in
Mm-hmm.
these times.
Exactly. And that's the way you defeat them because they are totally unarmed. They have no idea what God says or what he means when he says. There's a lot of things that have been hidden on purpose. Where Jesus said to the elect, there are many prophets and righteous men have wanted to see what you see and have not seen them. But blessed are your eyes for they see and your ears for they hear. Because there's a certain time when those things are revealed. And now is the
Amen.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. There's no
Well,
doubt about that.
bless you, Gloria, for bringing this wisdom to us.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be on.
And you have your website. You have the firmament, www.thefirmament.org, that has a lot of the books of wisdom. You also have the firmament.net, correct?
Yes, that's our blog site. And we have a
Okay.
wealth of information there too. And if you look over on the index, there's just all kinds of connections there and subject matters and answering questions and
Oh, wow.
explaining holidays.
And
Yeah,
you really connect it with, how people can live lawfully under the law of God.
absolutely.
Yeah. The more we can learn about that, we've been contaminated with, you know, the the Roman civil law and its traditions for too long.
Yes,
And
and that is a tyrannical law.
yes.
It gives the Pope all the authority and just the authority, which he's no different than Nebuchadnezzar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In fact, you, Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon, and in Revelation, the book of Revelation 17 and 18 pertains to the whore of Babylon, which is the Roman Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
all the worship practices are originate in Babylon. and they worship idols,
Mm-hmm.
and they justify themselves in worshiping idols. Well, God said, do not make any gods or have any strange gods besides me. I am your God. If you want me to be your God, you cannot worship idols.
Right, right. Some people think, oh well, we're going to do up Halloween for the kids, and that's playing with fire. I think it seems
Yeah,
harmless enough,
Halloween.
but
And we have lots of videos too that we've made through the years. Um, I think we were pioneers on YouTube when they first
um,
started. We got on there and we learned how to make videos and in
uh-huh. Right,
the
right.
program. And so we have lots of videos. We have lots of material, and we're available for questions at any time.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is
Yeah.
wonderful. Because I think there's a lot of wisdom that we've just scratched the surface of that we could use to help stop the horrible suffering that we're seeing and that we're trying to, get remedy for with our common law process. But, you know, the people's common law had its limitations. It was as limited as the people's knowledge was of scripture. So the more we can know, the stronger we can be.
Exactly. And we're here to impart that knowledge and that wisdom because we have been given the authority to do that.
He really encouraged me to study, more uh, of these books that I have not even addressed at all.
Well, it's a treasure hunt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You start
Yes.
looking into it, it's just an adventure, and it's so rewarding.
Yes, it is. Just the Bible, the fourth or fifth reading of it, I'm still discovering things that I never noticed before.
All the
So,
time, all the
Yeah,
time, or you understand it in a new way.
yes,
You know,
yes.
when you read it again, and then you read it again, and you understand something new that God's trying to show you.
Hmm.
it's a living book. It's alive. And when you're looking
Exactly.
there, God will guide you from one thing to another and cross references and all the tools that we have now. We have the Strong's Concordance. There's an excellent Bible app called the Blue Letter app, and the resources in there, and it's free. The resources in there are fabulous.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I spent a lot of money buying all those books, and they're all there in that app.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for putting it all together for us. You want
There's a
to
lot
give
there.
that link again before
Uh,
we
Which one?
the link to your website.
Okay, it's thefirmament.org and
Uh-huh.
also thefirmament.net. And there's links,
Oh, okay. I didn't realize there were two. Okay.
yeah, there's links on each one to go to the other one.
Okay. Okay. Great. Okay. Well, I don't know about you all, but I'm fading fast. But thank you so much. It's been a great blessing to have you as our guest. And does anybody else have any comments or questions that they want to ask? I see Keith is on. Oksana is on, or at least commenting. And I think everybody's listening tonight is a Christian. So, you're kind of preaching to the choir, but we can always learn more. So,
Absolutely.
correct. Always,
right.
always.
Oh,
God's arms are open.
okay. Well, that'll uh, we're going to have another broadcast next Thursday, and we're going to be addressing another topic, which I can't remember now what it is. Probably censorship. Because hopefully we won't have to address that with this broadcast. But
Right.
we have stumbled into it before, and
Yeah.
yeah, we'd love to see you back for that too.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Gloria. Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you. Thanks for having me.
All
Enjoyed
right.
to meet both of you.
Okay. Blessings
So
to all.
we'll be back next Thursday at 9 p.m., right?
Absolutely.
Would you like me to come on there again?
Sure.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. I'll plan on it.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very
All
much.
Thank
Night.
you.
Good night, all.
Right. And good night and God bless you all. Thank you.